Okay, good morning everybody and welcome to our 2021 IAgrE conference, Future Fuels for Agriculture. Thank you all for joining and thank you for giving up your time today. We have a great conference lined up with some fantastic presenters from a broad cross-section of our industry, but with one common theme, and that's fuel. Before we start, I just wanted to explain how the event will work today. Everyone will be put on mute, apart from the presenters, of course. After each presentation, there should be time for a few minutes of questions. Please, can you log your questions in the chat function, ideally starting with the letter Q or the word question, just to make it easier for us to identify. If we don't have time for your question, we will endeavour to capture it for the panel discussion at the end, which I hope you will join us for. We will have a 10-minute break at 11:20, and then we'll stop for lunch at 1:15 for 30 minutes. Please feel free to stay online and use those times for chatting and networking. The 45-minute panel discussion will commence promptly at 1:45 and will be hosted by our Landwards editor, Mr. Andrew Newbold. So I'd like to hand over now to the President of the Institution of Agricultural Engineers, Mr. Paul Hemingway, who will give you his introductory remarks and also introduce our first speaker today. Over to you, Paul.
Good, thank you, Charlie. So, ladies and gentlemen, as the current president of IAgrE, it obviously gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to this year's conference, being held for the second time in this virtual space. I mean, it's a bit disappointing that we didn't quite have the confidence to get together in a live venue, but with the ongoing uncertainty surrounding COVID, I think everybody understands why we've done what we've done, and clearly it does enable people to join our conference from all corners, and even speakers from overseas and delegates from overseas as well. So welcome everybody to this year's conference. I feel a little bit, I should just mention, I feel as if I'm in a bit of an education sandwich here, because one of our speakers today is Alistair Walshall, who was a student of mine some 40 years ago at Harper Adams. And also I see attending is Dr. Ken Pollock, who was a lecturer of mine some 50 years ago, I think, or very close to that, Ken, at Newcastle, many years ago. So welcome both. The theme this year centers on energy utilization and really how this is inevitably going to change over the coming years. You know, given the climate crisis that's absolutely front and center of the news at the moment. The simple fact that we have to do something to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And, you know, when you look at it, particularly in Western Europe or in the Western world generally, agriculture has become heavily industrialized. We're using high power machinery. It generally consumes quite large quantities of fossil fuels, and notably diesel, of course, which is rapidly becoming a word that shouldn't be used in anybody's vocabulary, it seems to me. And over and above that, the climate changes that we're seeing seem to me to have shortened the weather windows, so that, you know, the opportunities for planting, for harvesting are getting shorter. And that would seem to me to dictate that we're going to continue to use this big tackle for some time to come. So on the field side, you know, we need energy sources going forwards, which are both environmentally friendly and, you know, enable us to operate in remote locations for prolonged periods of time. And if you look at the horticultural world, of course, we're in Northern Europe or close to Northern Europe, not quite as close as Yano, but we're certainly in the cooler climes, and that really dictates that we use greenhouses extensively to extend growing seasons. And so heating these greenhouses as well needs to be done environmentally in an environmentally friendly way. So it's really against this background that we framed the conference today, and I've really delighted that we've got a very high caliber panel of 5 outstanding speakers who will be looking at the issues we face, all from slightly different angles. And you know, we could not have timed this better, frankly. You know, as the COP conference is getting into its stride in Glasgow this week, you know, this is an absolutely topical subject to discuss. So our first speaker today is Caroline Drummond, Mbe, the chief executive of LEAF. Caroline's been running the farming and environmental charity LEAF since it began, I think, in 1991. Her work is dedicated to securing more sustainable farming practices and addressing climate change through the regenerative processes of integrated farm management. At the same time, LEAF aims to build better education, trust, and understanding of farming, food, health, and the environment. And it's very clear, having met Caroline in the past, she's personally extremely passionate about this. She holds a degree in agriculture and has got broad practical experience gained in the UK and overseas. And you can't have much better practical experience than being married to a Cornish dairy farmer, Caroline, I think. She's actively involved in a range of industry partnerships and initiatives across the UK, Europe, and worldwide, including the government's recent Trade and Agriculture Commission. Her presentation today will focus on renewable energy and hopefully build a vision for us of what a fuel-free farm could look like in 2030. So I'd like to thank Caroline very much for finding the time to do this for us today. I know she's very busy and will be heading north to Glasgow later in the week. So without further ado, over to you, Caroline.
Thank you, and thank you so much for inviting me to come and speak. Yes, I suddenly realised what a challenge it was to say, what will a fossil fuel-free farm look like in 9 years' time? And so apologies, I don't think I have all the answers, but I hope that I will at least inspire some thinking behind some of the areas in terms of sustainability, but also in terms of how we really try and innovate and drive the change that's going to be needed. I'm just going to share my screen now, hopefully. So future fossil fuels in agriculture. I mean, the real challenge that climate change we are facing with climate change is, of course, the very fact that we are digging out fossil fuels out of the ground. We use it for diesel, we use it for our fuels, we use it for cement, and of course, on farm as well, we use it for plastics and numerous other areas. And I think that, you know, from that perspective, it is a huge challenge. With regards to the whole area of as an organisation, for us, that attention to detail in really trying to look at efficiency and things like that is something that's been very, very important. But when I think of, you know, when I was born, about sort of CO2 levels of the atmosphere around sort of 322 parts per million, today they're around 415 parts per million and rising. And I think, you know, it's going to be so critical that we, at the end of the day, trap carbon dioxide, carbon in the ground through better farming practices. When it comes to looking at what are the big challenges, as our chairman has already highlighted, you know, we have disease and pest challenges, we have wildfire, we have floods, we have droughts, and of course, COVID. But the changes and the impact of climate change for the farming sector is huge. I used to say about 5 years ago, farmers don't deal in climate change, they deal in weather. Well, today it is very evident, the intense rainstorms, the intense hailstones and things like that that we have, and not to mention, obviously, from a global perspective, the wildfires are impacting our farming, our wildlife, and obviously our lives. And so that's a huge challenge. So COP26 is, you know, right there in terms of the whole aspect of ensuring that we ultimately secure global net zero by mid-century to keep the 1.5 degrees centigrade within reach. You know, we keep hearing it, and I think that's one of the important areas that has come out so far in terms of the discussions around what's happening up at COP. That 1.5 degrees should not be exceeded. The other key, there are sort of 4 key priorities. So obviously one's the 1.5 degrees. The second is, of course, adapting to protect communities and natural habitats. The third is mobilising finance, and today is Finance Day. It's also Farmer Day up at COP. Farming is not really getting a very loud voice. This year's COP, I think it will be a lot higher when it's over in Africa next year. But I think what will come out of today will all be about the finance. There has been some really big global commitments towards finance, and in terms of some $100 billion in terms of should have been mobilized by 2020. That hasn't been achieved. And so the international finance community will certainly be looking to see what it is, how do we really engender the green finance. And I think today is going to be a lot more around that. And then, of course, working together to deliver, and that's going to be really, really important. So for us as an organization, COP is, we've been going 30 years. Sustainability has always been at the forefront, but we have observer status. We will be in there's two zones, the blue zone, where all the political things are happening, and as an observer, I'm allowed in there, which is really interesting. And then there's the green zone, which is NGOs and public. And so we'll be working with Sainsbury's for global farmer stories around the world, linking up with young people and children. And we've also been working with the Bond Challenge, which is looking at landscape restoration. And in addition to that, the IUCN, where we've just been recognised as a nature-based solution as an organisation. So we're really pleased about that. For us, what would success look like? Well, it would be sharing of information and data with farmers so that farmers are drawing that value onto farms. It's really critical. As an industry, we hold so much of the solution, and that's going to be so important. Evidence of the work being done, so case studies, there's a lot of really good stories out there already. Let's not duplicate. And then the third area for us is about youth engagement, so education. And the great thing with farming is agriculture touches all 5 senses. And so, the more we have the capability to touch each one of those senses in our education, the deeper the learning, the better the understanding, and obviously the richer the experience. So for us, that's something that's really important. So in terms of what fossil fuel free farm would look like, it's that element of the starting point. Where do we actually use fossil fuels? And so I think that's the really key area. The second is, of course, efficiencies. The third is the alternatives. Now, of course, there's going to be some brilliant talks today around the research, the innovation and technology. And one thing I forever hear is, I don't understand why farmers aren't taking up this technology. It's because the technology itself doesn't work on farm. It's ensuring that it is shrouded in good management practices. And that's something that's so critical in all of this. The management, the research and the innovation and technology is really, really key. This is doing things differently. It's doing things traditionally. It's understanding the barriers, of course, looking for the successes. And when you start looking at, how do I take an audit? So we, in 1993, did the first leaf audit. It came out of the Green Door, which was then to become the Forestry Stewardship Council. And our approach was looking at giving credit to farmers, what they're doing, understanding the areas where they haven't perhaps thought about it, and then thinking about those areas that they should be doing a little bit better and a bit more efficiently. And that first document was carbon copy back in 93. We would get the carbon copy and the farmers would keep the other half. And it's now, interactive online, into automatic benchmarking, etc. And that's been something that's been really important for us in terms of driving that attention to detail. And we've collected data right from the very beginning, which has allowed us to measure impact, improvement, and weaknesses, and really big successes as well. So when it came to energy efficiency and fossil fuel use, in 99, we were measuring diesel, electricity, and gas use pretty well. And we saw the trends doing brilliantly in terms of what farmers were recording when it all of a sudden kind of fell in 99. And you thought, what's happened here? And it was because of the truthing that happened behind what farmers are doing all the time. And from that perspective, it was looking at, actually we introduced renewables and farmers automatically thought, actually, there's something different I could do. And I think we're at that exciting turning point again now, where farmers are thinking, actually, I want to replace diesel fully. I want to see whether I can get, really different ways of driving change. So in terms of really trying to look at attention to detail, farmers are like the ultimate circus act, living on that tightrope, really trying to balance on the unicycle, but juggling 9 balls at any one time. And I think this is something we never deal in single issues. That when it comes to the net carbon zero issue, it is again, shrouded in a myriad of other requirements in terms of farmers having to make a living, the importance of nature, the importance of acceptability from society, and ultimately its success from a practical productivity point of view, right through to impact on the climate. So enriching the environment, really engaging local communities, as well as driving that balance between the best of modern technology and the best of traditional methods is something that's really key. So we are now, with the monitoring of energy efficiency, some 67% of our leaf mark growers. We run farmer to farmer network. We have leaf mark, which 45% of UK fruit and veg will be leaf mark certified now. And Tesco have just embraced that, so we will see that change not only in the UK but globally. But 67% of our members that are doing leaf mark will either one or more renewable energy. 39% are using a carbon footprint tool, and we're seeing that significantly change. And in fact, that will be a requirement within the next standard. But it's the starting point that's so key in here. It's the getting the baseline criteria and really just trying to ultimately look at what can I do better, how can I improve it. And plastics are a great example of that sort of hidden fossil fuel usage as well. So, how do we get rid of fossil fuel? We could go down this route, or in terms of more subsistence farming, but we're not going to really go back to that specific area. And you can see there, the deforestation challenge alongside this as well is absolutely key. And in terms, or we can go for the big tech. And I think, this is going to be really critical in terms of the tech that works, that will be efficient, that reduces the emissions, and actually makes sense from a practical point of view. So when I look at some of the approaches that our farmers are having, this is Duncan Farrington. He farms in Northamptonshire. He's leaf mark certified and has been for a number of years, and a demonstration farmer for 25 years. So for him, he is now plastic neutral. He's recognized, and he's also recognized as carbon neutral gold standard. He was the first, he's the world's first on a food product, which again is something that's really important. But his next challenge is not only looking at the attention to detail in the soil, really trying to improve the health and the organic matter status, capture soil, but actually looking at reducing waste, recording energy, really looking at those alternatives. And traditionally, of course, they've been solar panels, they've been looking at wind turbines and things like that. But this is where we're striving and driving into new areas. And at the moment, he's planting lots of trees as an offset. And offset's fantastic, but as he recognizes, he wants to be doing much more. And when you start looking at, what is this technology going to look like? And of course, batteries are one of our huge challenges. I'm not a battery expert, but I can guarantee there'll be a battery expert around the table here. But looking at some of the research projects around the development of new battery technology, the solid-solid interface, the liquid-liquid interface, rather than the liquid-solid interface, means that, wow, if I did have an electric car, or when I have an electric car, I'm not waiting for an hour and a quarter for it to recharge. It's as quick as if I was to go in a garage to fill in with diesel or petrol. And in addition to that, it's much more efficient. So we're looking at the moment, some of our demonstration farmers are looking at hydrogen tractors. They need something with a lot of grunt, obviously. And in addition to that, they need somewhere where they can store hydrogen. And I think some of this storage aspect is going to be really important. The drone technology, the lighter touch, the not actually going out there at all. And then, of course, the attention to detail through the data that we are increasingly capturing. And it's lovely to see Paul Miller, because I used to lecture at Shuttleworth College and when he was at Silso, and of course, you know, we mustn't forget, particularly in the engineering, the ag engineering group, you know, you guys have been doing an awful lot of really good things for a very long time. But also, of course, there's nature. Nature is the biggest proven technology in climate change and really addressing some of that. And I wanted to find out what's the most efficient energy animal, and it's the jellyfish. So are there lessons that we can learn in terms of our nature around us that we can then start adopting into farming? And of course, you know, so what's going to look like? You know, we will have the JCBs, that's their first zero emission hydrogen digger. We were talking earlier about Climate Works and the really trying to draw carbon dioxide out of the air. But then, of course, the importance of planting trees. But actually, perhaps more importantly, it's maintaining the trees that we currently have and ensuring that we improve their health, so their capability to absorb carbon dioxide is much more effectively done. And livestock. Now, this is always the sort of the slightly controversial elements. It's just sad. Okay, you know, I'm married to a dairy farmer, so I would say this anyway. But I think when you look at the importance of the biodiversity, of the nutrient management, of the soil improvements that livestock bring, it is absolutely critical. I was talking to a sheep farmer yesterday, and she was saying, you know, we have some 120 different plant species in our land here. We have some 280 insects and animal species. And in addition to that, we've got, you know, a further 100 moths as well. So, you know, we get rid of livestock at our peril. And I think it's something that, you know, within the efficiencies of really looking at the renewables, I know there's going to be somebody talking about the methane capture. You know, this is what we've got to be using. It's really important for our health that we have meat within our diet. It's bioavailable. And I was kind of really interested when you start looking at, as an industry, we're looking much more at biological types approaches alongside physical and chemistry in terms of solutions for farming. But let's not go for a food sector that is just purely driven by chemicals, which is where a lot of the new plant-based alternative foods or meat alternative foods are. So we work with the Jersey farmers. All of Jersey is Leaf Mark certified. But again, for them, you know, that efficiency, that attention to detail is something that's really, really critical. And of course, that drive of benchmarking and improving benchmarking. You know, this is IAgrE and the work that they're doing now to try and really not only decarbonize the process around fertilizer usage, and you know, our big usage are your diesel, and in addition to that, obviously fertilizer applications. Get manures managed more effectively if we can improve the nutrient utilization of plants through plant breeding, and in addition to that, if we can get the carbon footprint of fertilizer down, you know, you're starting to get into some really good wins, good opportunities, because at the end of the day, we still have to be about production. So what is going to good look like? It is around clean water. It is about healthy livestock, improved soil conditions, and healthy food and healthy environments. And I think when we're starting to really place and understand where renewables fit in, you know, this is our ultimate goal. It is supporting a farming industry in not only having some on-farm solutions, but actually industry solutions. And infrastructure is going to be so key in terms of driving this and making it happen. And are we going to see food change? Well, yes, and I think this goes back to plant breeding. And although it's not strictly sort of in your space of the engineering, this is actually about looking at how do we really address the fact that we need to have a much more diverse diet. 60% of the world's diet is dependent on 3 crops. There are over 300,000 edible plant species. So our capability to improve and encourage diversity in terms of plant life, how we grow it, and its bioavailability to us as humans is going to be really important. The ultimate trick for farmers is to be part of the solution for the health agenda. And as one of our farmers said, fairly recently, I get it now. I want to see the vitamin tablet industry go bust because people are buying food and nutrition that is really in that good area. And with that is coming huge engineering and technology, whether it be on a contact lens and being able to look at the sugar content, glucose content of people with diabetes, whether it be that whole area of having personalized prescriptions of diets. With that will come not only health aspects, but it will come carbon footprint aspects as well. And when you start looking at new ways of how people are eating, whether it be through vending machines, and in Japan, there's a vending machine for one vending machine for every 27 people. That's a fresh fruit and veg one. Or whether it be growing vegetables in the supermarkets, and I see now that's increasingly happening across London, or whether it be Soylent, but all the new foods that are coming through. There's going to be a lot of change in behaviour, and with it will come some ethical aspects and some environmental aspects. We need to keep the balance on that. And of course, I couldn't really not say how important it is to engage a younger generation. These are the children that are inspired at a very young age by the combine that they see and wanting to be a manufacturer in that area. They are inspired by the plant science, by soil, by health of our insects and our biodiversity. And the more that we get young people out on farm at an early age, the better it is. And we've been doing a lot of work, not only with Open Farm Sunday and Online Farm Sunday, but of course on our education activities, where we're increasingly going now into schools and supporting teachers with resources and supporting farmers to obviously spread that word. And we have Farmer Time has been a huge success in pairing up schools with farmers. So we can't hide from the real challenges that are out there. The speakers that follow will be able to give a lot more detail about some of the renewables, but I think it's just important to put it within the farmer context of why and where and how we will be able to use it. And, having recently gone in that whole area, my husband and I went around the farm the other day looking at a plastic audit. You suddenly start thinking, my goodness, we are using a huge amount of plastic. How do we become, plastic free? When you start looking at the importance of, whether it be, as I said, the scraper tractor, or whether it be, a huge tractor for cultivation practices on some of our larger arable farms, how do we drive that change in a practical and realistic way? Because food production is really key. And this is my little daughter is she's not little, she's little, she's tiny. She's at Bath University in her 4th year, and she is a stunt cheerleader. So they throw her up in the air and hopefully catch her. And that's the biggest, for me, that is one of the biggest areas of trust. It is really important. And I think going forward, actually, there is a huge amount of disruption, and government have to recognise we need really enabling and quite edgy legislation. And we will need a new trust model so that there is a better partnership between government, industry, schemes like Leaf Mark, where you have independent external verification. And indeed, we already have earned recognition for the Environment Agency, right through to the importance of voluntary approaches. We do need to drive change at speed now. And of course, our learning from nature is going to be absolutely key. Biomimicry is one of my favorite topics. This is the gecko, who has the capability, obviously, of walking up any surface without, kind of sticky pads. It's got its own little millions of fibers within its fingers, toes. And we really can learn from that. And it's really interesting to see new innovations coming through. For example, screens capturing sunlight on windows. And there's an interesting organization in America called Second Skin. You have to be very careful you don't suddenly get into the tattoo parlor in California. But in terms of that whole area of really trying to understand what is it that works within nature that we can much more effectively adopt in terms of driving change in some of our new technology as well, biological, physical and chemical. So I think in terms of this whole area, profit, marketplace, it's very, very key. This is about really driving change. And one of my favorites saying, you know, if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. However, we now need to go at scale, and we need to go fast, and we do need to go together. And I think it's going to be increasingly important to ensure the whole spectrum of the renewables, carbon capture, reaching net carbon zero is really, really addressed, and that farmers are recognised for their part in that, because it's going to be a big challenge. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Caroline. Absolutely fascinating. We've got time for probably one or two questions. There's a question from David Clare. What is Leaf's view on carbon offsetting by planting trees? There is a finite area we can plant. Is planting trees just a sticking plaster covering out burning of fossil fuels?
So planting trees is important, and we can certainly do a lot more. I think I was very amused when we had the last elections. It was like top trunks, because there was just such competition to plant more trees. But I think it goes back to my comment on, you know, just about every farm in the country will have very valuable copse or woodland areas or hedgerows. And the real thing that's so critical is, you know, actually maintaining and building the capability and managing that. And I think we need to be very careful we don't get carried away by planting lots of trees that are just never managed. And even, you know, anything planted now, it's going to be 10, 15 years anyway before they are going to be really effective in this game of carbon capture. So yes, important, but for us, the real aspect is around maintenance, improvement, restoration of trees, and that's why we're working with the Bond Challenge in the restoration area, but also improving soil health. And, you know, if you remember, part of the Paris Accord was the sort of 4 by 1,000. So I think it's 0.04% increase in soil organic matter, you know, and this is really critical of really changing and driving change. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. A question from me. Could you say a little bit more about what Leaf Mark is?
Yes, so Leaf Mark is the environmental sustainability standard. We're ICL fully code of compliance, so we're a global standard. We're not about provenance, we're about environmental sustainability. We build on, here in the UK, the core standard of Red Tractor, and globally, Global Gap, and as I said, some 45% of UK fruit and veg is Leaf Mark certified. That will be labelled through Waitrose, and on September the 30th, or a month ago, Tesco announced that all their fresh produce over the next 3 to 5 years is going to be Leaf Mark certified, and that will be both UK and global. So it supports farmers who are doing great things for the environment, gives them recognition in that area. For consumers, it's that buying into sustainability. It's not a competition. It's, you know, there's almost sort of, oh, it has to be organic to be sustainable. No, the reality is actually sustainability is about driving and striving to get good soil management, good water quality, good air quality, and of course, improved and enhanced biodiversity. And we are the only standard out of the 5 independently verified standards here in the UK, which is Red Tractor, Soil Organic, Soil Association, Organic Farmers and Growers, RSPCA Assured, which is obviously an animal welfare one, but we're the only ones that will be doing impact reporting. So this will be our 10th year next year on impact reporting as well.
Okay. Thank you. We've probably got time for one more question from Toby Watley. What are the 3 key crops consumed by man? Do others offer the same nutrient density for the area we have to produce them?
Wheat, potatoes and rice. So nutrient dense, but not nutrient valuable or vitamin value. And I think, you know, that's, if you probably look at your own diets, and, you know, apologies, I'm not replying this personally, but there's probably only about 10 meals you eat on a rotation. And again, that's the critical area. When I was in Taiwan, by 7 o'clock in the morning, I would have eaten, I guess, around 15 different vegetables for breakfast. And when we have a coffee break in the UK, we have to have coffee and biscuits. And you're thinking, well, why are we not having coffee and vegetables or coffee and fruit? And so, we do need to nudge that whole area of how we improve our nutrients and our diversity. Oh, and just, one fact, we're only 10% human, because 90% of the DNA in our sort of rests in our stomach gut. So if we can feed them better, it's just like the soil. If we look after the soil better, it performs better. And it's that biological activity that's so critical.
Okay, thank you for that. Brilliant. Okay, well, thanks so much for doing the presentation. I know you're really busy with COP, and I don't think you're joining us for the panel discussion later. So
no, my apologies, and I hope the rest of the day goes really well.
Yeah, I'm sure it will. Well, thank you very much for that. Okay.